All right. Welcome, everyone. This is David Morgan of the MorganReport.com with David Dubine. And David and I actually have a fairly long history. I started looking at his stuff pretty much when he started. And I got intrigued with his approach and his open-mindedness and how he looked at the world and what's happening. And that was in the early days before things really got wild. I was in Mexico doing some work vacation, looking at a particular mining event, and I did a my first interview with you, and I'll never forget it because you and I were ahead of the food curve. We were talking about food and food shortage coming, and we were probably a year or 2 years ahead of that problem. And what really took me back was that interview when I asked you, how bad is this weather going to get? How bad is it going to be? What happens? And you said, and if I misquote you, please tell me, but the food price was like a 7x in most of these huge mislocations in the world. And I think I asked you to repeat a sevenfold. And no, so we went over that. So we're going to readdress the food situation. And we're also going to look at what's going on with the BRICS and the metals and all that. But I think I want to start off with food. So did I misquote you on that? When we have these mass disruptions in the food supply that it goes up like sevenfold?
That is correct. And remember, that's based on just historical events that have happened in the past. I mean, you could forecast out and say it's going to go up 100x, but that never happened in history, except maybe in the Weimar Republic or somewhere in Hungary after World War II. And those were isolated events in a few nations. But just in an overall general trend, and you can map it back to the 1200s, 1600s, 1800s. There's been several events where continentally, at least, there's been enough disruption through war and weather events that coincide on top, layering these event disruptions that things go up 5, 7x. So we've kind of doubled and a little more depending on the specific food products, and there's less availability. So we're trending toward that direction. That was already forecast in with weather disruptions on a doubling or tripling. Now we're adding in the geopolitics. So if anything were to go wrong, because you see these guys they're button heads over there with Hezbollah and Israel, and there's none of them are backing down. So if there's some sort of more major disruption in oil, you're going to watch your food prices skyrocket, and we will absolutely hit that 7x. Now, what would that do to people's psychological processing of the world around them is one thing compared to what's really going to happen to the economy. So I guess you have to almost take those both as an intertwining, like a DNA strand, human behavior, and then the economy itself. But we're prepared.
Well, I want to talk. Sorry, I want to talk to you about where it'll take the economy. Before we get there, I want to take kind of a couple steps in between. And this is what you said a moment ago about a 2x. That's my real life. That's my experience. I mean, you go to, some of these fast food places that used to have a dollar meal or something, and now they're like 20. What do you think about that? Like, I've listened to several proponents say that the fast food industry's, I wouldn't say wiped out, but it's certainly curtailed, because why would you get fast food when it's usually convenience and price? And now it may be more convenient, but the price is so astronomical relative to what it was 2 years ago and yet in my own hometown here, I still see them lined up at the drive-through window. So can you take me through your thought process on how this kind of wraps down? And you can take it all the way to the end when we do hit 7x and what it looks like. So I'm just going to, remain in listener mode for a while. I just want to hear how you see this progressing.
The fast food and delivery industry was a lifeline during COVID. But it seems that's a rug pull, because most people were planning on using fast food as their backup to the main food buying, because as you saw in supermarkets, gallons of milk were rocketing up, eggs, were rocketing up, beef prices to the moon. So a lot of people had planned and just said, oh, I'll just go out to the fast food place at least once a day, and that'll really cut my cost, the food cost for the family, because at that time, it hadn't hit all these gargantuan rises. But you're right, something that used to be $1 meal is now $8. So if you look at some of these things generally across even the fast food, they're rising faster than the supermarket prices. So they're already in the doubling and tripling, like a 3x compared to what you're seeing out in just general land, or even a 4x in a lot of places. And also our culture has just been brought up that we don't cook healthy home cooked meals anymore. You start from scratch. You put your beans in water and let them soak for 12 hours before you even start. That's barely a thought for 90% of the population in the US of going off, hitting a supermarket and going in the bulk dry aisle and, buying pounds of something that's bulk and dry that they might have to rehydrate themselves. And starting from scratch on a meal like that is such a foreign concept. It's been, purposely removed from our consciousness because it's just faster to buy the ready served meals. When things get more expensive and less choices are available, this is really where it's going to start to bend people's psyche when they go into the supermarkets. And we're already starting to see it where one whole shelf will be one deep of something, but they fill the shelf to make it appear that there's still those choices. But as soon as you pull one box or one can down, then just behind it's already empty. They're shrinking the height of the shelves, and they're shrinking the length of the store aisles themselves to make it appear more full because they're just removing sections out. So if there's less space to fill up, it looks more full. A lot of things are being done with like the feng shui, and notice it from Costco into regular like IGAs or Food Lions or whatever supermarket you're going to use. You start to see the same phenomenon happening across all supermarkets in Asia, in Europe, and in the United States. So in tandem, it seems that they're starting to understand just visually the way you perceive enough food or not enough food as you walk in somewhere. They're trying to use everything they've learned about advertising and eye movements and things since the 80s to get you to appear that there's still a lot more food. But what happens when your main choices disappear? Are you even prepared to cook something else or, take something else in on the body? Maybe you're not familiar with couscous. Okay, how about millet? Sorghum. I mean, some of these grains that people aren't used to, spelt. I mean, who knows how to cook spelt? There's going to be a huge learning curve. And are people going to be able to adapt to it? And really, it really boils down to how much money are they going to spend on food? And if it becomes that much of a burden, then the greater economy is going to suffer where they're not going to go buy that extra pair of shoes. They're not going to buy the extra shirt. Then other things just die on the vine. And I think we're already seeing that. I don't know, at least from my lens, where I'm seeing a tremendous amount of money being rediverted into food, and a lot of other things in the economy are just withering because there's no extra money there to spend. Maybe I'm incorrect. Maybe I'm just looking at it from my view and I'm just too focused on what I see. But if you're seeing the same thing, then it must be more of a general trend. But I would ask anybody out there, what do you see?
Let's go down a little further. So let's just take it as a metaphor. And 6 months from now, two major fast food chains are out of business. Well, those have specific buildings with specific logos. I mean, they're widely recognized. They're designed that way for advertising purposes. You know where the Taco Bell is. You know where the Jack in the Box is. You know where the whatever. So now they're closed up, and no one's going to, someone might take the building down and put something else up. That's a possibility. But generally speaking, it's just going to sit there empty. So now you're driving by and you're thinking, it's not open. I'm looking at the psyche. It's like, wait a minute, is that like a sign of further deterioration of the US of A, the late great empire that's failing before our eyes? And would that have any impact in your view as far as thoughts about not only the overall robustness that's leaving the US, but also food? That's like, wow, I can't get there anymore. And it's probably just as well because it costs so damn much anyway. I should go to the grocery store. And the follow-up question I'm giving you two is, when people have to, they do adapt. And they're going to figure out the word spelt, and they're going to figure out how to eat it, right?
Yeah, how many tens of thousands of years have we, just the Homo sapiens sapien, been here through, the end of an ice age, the Younger Dryas impact, these massive cataclysms, these apexes of civilization and declines. We've been through a lot. So your number one thing is going to be food. Because I had a friend of mine, Roger, when we were living out in Hawaii, he was trying to go on a diet, and he was just eating rice. And then for the last cleanse, he was doing all these cleanses. He stopped eating for 3 days, just ingesting like bone broth and water. And he's like, dude, all I did was think about food. That's what I dreamed about it, thought about it. That's the only thing that was on my mind. Literally, after he stopped eating, after he'd already gone into this fasting and sort of famine mode in his body on himself for cleansing, it really went 100% of 100% of the time, only thought about food, food, food. So your mind will take you there. And that's why people will do anything to stay alive. And that's the scariest part for me is, people will do anything to feed their children. And we've spoken about this before. I mean, they're going to do anything, and you have to be expecting that. The hopefulness in this, wanting to spend money, invest money, and knowing that tomorrow will be better, that's a great way for humanity to think, because I'm ready to get up in the morning. I'm up at 6. I was up at 4 something finishing videos today, and then we went out and ran out, came back, rested for a bit. But I was excited to get up this morning. I was already ready for the day when I got up, because I had a purpose today. I had many things on my mind that I wanted to accomplish. But for the average person looking out at the general landscape of news or whatever, and it's just doom and gloom, do you think they want to get up? Do you think they're going to be hopeful? And that just drags, because that's a vibratory pattern that moves through the society. And then also how they're going to behave, because they have nothing left to lose. And then you already see kind of the younger generation, they really don't have anything to focus on. There's no goals for them. There's not many. That's why everything is disintegrating across what we see as the younger strata of our civilization here. And I would include the United States and many other countries. That look through the eyes of a 16-year-old today or a 20-year-old today. What are they seeing out there other than getting on social media and possibly making some money that way? What hope do they have? If there's no hope in society for any part of the generational, from being born yesterday all the way until being 100, hope needs to move through the entire strata for us to even have reasons to get. And this degradation of everything that we have seen since the high apex, you and I, in the 90s, or, you could debate where that might be, late 80s, early 90s, but you take hope out of the society. And then what happens? You're driving by abandoned food stores, abandoned things, go through downtown Detroit or some of these neighborhoods that have been abandoned completely and left to rot. And then how would your feeling be if that's your neighborhood and you're living in there? You really, the focus on, what's your focus? We need money. We need investment to keep our country going, and we need innovation, and we need people to start having a purpose for getting up in the mornings to make their world a better place. But if that's lost for 80%, 70% of the people, then what does that do for us literally on the ground? Because that vibratory pattern that's out there, the way people are thinking and the way they're pushing their emotions out around you into the ether, for a better term, has to be reflective and effective across everybody. So are you feeling down? Are you feeling drained? Or is it the people around you? Is it just where you live? Is it the news? What is it? Because everybody's feeling different. Electromagnetic field changes from the sun. I mean, there's a huge amount of things in play right now, but it all revolves around the mind. And again, it comes right back to that psyche. People eat, and especially if you take the food away from them, that's the last that they're going to lose it. If they lose the food, they could lose the economy and their job, but if you take the food away, that will be the straw that breaks the camel's back.
Well, let's dive a little deeper on specific. I live one state I'm right next to Idaho, as you know. And one new TikTok, and I think it's going viral. It's a young farmer, and he's talking to his grandmother, and he talks about the powers that be turning off the water to his farm. And we talked about that off air briefly. Can you elaborate on what's going on with the credit system in farming, the water system in Idaho?
Yeah, you're a bit closer out there. It's not just one. I've seen multiple of those same videos of farmers complaining. So yesterday evening, I reached out to a fair few people in different potato councils and different potato growers, Sun Valley potatoes. And I wrote them messages, and I said, I really hear your plight, because I have a farm in East Tennessee. I want to get your message out. We need to know what's going on in the state up there, because potatoes are a main, food stuff for us in America, but potato starches are a huge ingredient for a lot of processed foods. Like if we lose the potato crop this year, prices are just going to go absolutely ballistic, because it's so much is involved in potato in everything that you're eating. So I want to get their message out. So I wrote out, the floor is yours. Literally, just come on. I'll give you the floor. Spread your message. And nobody wrote me back yet. Nobody returned my calls. Not yet. But I keep seeing that they're turning off the water on the guise of, it's kind of like one of those Harry Reid things where they had the standoff. It was all about Bureau of Land Management and now water resources and, turning off the taps because of green agendas. They need to save the water, this and that. And like, wait a second, they had rights for the water for 100 years, and you decide in unison to turn off all the water and irrigation for the potato crop right during this most integral time for it, most important time to make sure it's irrigated. And you saw right next door in Washington what they were trying to do to make everybody who had any animals on their land register as a contained feedlot and put like $100,000 of infrastructure in. So if their goats peed or their cow peed on their 50 acres, that or their sheep were, you know, going to the bathroom on 20 acres, that they had to put all these containment because it might contaminate the water source. Those two states right next to each other with all that push into removing food at the local level and the homestead level, it's a little bit, now they're going to agribiz level to stop it. So in my opinion, they're absolutely trying to shut off the food source. In addition to the destruction of how many, we're up to 50 or 70 million chickens now culled. Where's the egg going to come from? Now it jumped over into the cattle. They're culling 1 million cattle this month here in the United States. Now, I know that's not a lot because there's, you know, an enormous amount of cattle out there. But it's the beginning of it. I really intuitively feel in my sixth sense that they're just turning off the food tap right now. And for what reason, I'm not going to conjecture because I'm not going to. But I'm sure everybody else out there has an opinion. But cutting off the water is a message that your food supply is being restricted by mandate and purpose now.
Let's switch over to that same topic, but take it from a different angle. That's, you know, Bill Holter always harps on it, the whole system built on credit. I watched another video, I'll just state it so get you going. And it was an older guy, you know, that's a family farm, not a big one, makes a living. And his son comes back to talk to his dad, thinking about leaving the job he has in farming again. He goes, well, how well did you do? And he goes, well, we made $320,000. He goes, no, Dad, you grossed $320,000. You only netted $20,000. Because I can't live on that. My job I hate. I'd like to farm, but it pays a lot more than that. And he kind of hangs his head down and goes, yeah, you're right. Well, that whole farm, and that's just one small thing, is almost all these are based, or at least family farms, well, the corporates as well are based on credit. And I see it as, you know, another two-tiered division, the way I look at it, that, you know, if you're a corporate factory farm, you're going to get all the loans you need to stay in business. But if you're a big family farm and you've had some good years and whatever, unless you've paid off everything, which would be rare, but there are some, you may just be taken out, not the water shut off, but the funds shut off. Comments, please.
Then your farm confiscated and sold. And who's there to buy it? Well, the next big factory farm next to you. Operational loans is what those are called. And I've seen several videos on those guys talking out in Idaho too, where we're just not going to be able to pay it back this year. They cut off the water. So all the fuel, the seed, the machinery repair, the fertilizers, all these things that they put in, there's no way to recoup the cost if, I'm just saying if, the continuation of water shutoff continues. That's why I wanted to bring some awareness to it, because we need everybody collectively to start talking about this. Because after the awareness came in Washington and a huge amount of people started sharing and talking, and they'd stopped, they rescinded that contained feedlot for small family farms with like 1 or 2 cows, 5 sheep, 3 goats. So it's just going to take, again, the awareness to then spread the message, to have these conversations, say you can't cut off our food source because of some green agenda water saving thing. That, where did it come from? It was like an edict or a mandated thing. It wasn't voted on. And this is where a lot of governmental bodies are overstepping their bounds on what they think they can do. And it stops once we say it stops. And that's the whole thing. You've noticed through history, when enough people come together and say that needs to stop, collectively as a society, we don't accept it, then it stops every single time. 100% of the time it is stopped. And just trace back their history. When we as a society said we can't do it that way anymore, it needs to stop, it always stops.
Well, let's look at that.
I'm curious. Well, let me, David, on your end there, what are you hearing? I mean, you're just a state over there. I mean, is it in the local newspapers? Are you hearing about it on the news? Or, I mean, what's your take being that much closer?
I'm a bad source because I pay almost zero attention to the mainstream news. So, you know, once in a while I'll do it just to kind of check in that's still there. But on the alt news, it's pretty well known. In fact, I knew we were going to have this interview, and I was thinking about calling an ex Congress critter that I know in Idaho, talking to him, but I couldn't make the call. So, but coming back to your last statement, you've got Ice Age Farmer, Full Spectrum Survival, Canadian Prepper. I mean, all these websites have done a lot to awaken people as far as what's happening. And I don't like to put words in anyone's mouth, but to me, they've indicated that, as you just said, it's up to us and growing your own food, legal or illegal, which it's just preposterous to me. They can, outlaw you growing your own food on your own land. Of course, we know that's never really your own land because of the way the property tax system is set up. But beyond that, you're living there. You can't grow your own food. Are you kidding me? So what do you think about that? And you think that we will have a wave, as you said earlier, people do anything to feed their kids, and if everybody's, growing some corn or whatever in a rural area, maybe they've got an acre, let's say the average is an acre, but they're planting the heck out of it and, they're doing okay. What are they going to do? They're going to spray everybody from the air and take it out? Maybe. I don't know. I mean, I just want your thinking on, one, will the general populace rebel? And two, if the general populace rebels, what do you think the other side might do about it?
They would absolutely rebel. If you come, well, I'm just going to say in Tennessee here, so just use as a very microcosm in Tennessee. The rules here are very, let's say, loose compared to a lot of places like California or New York. The talk of coming down and removing backyard birds because of the new best friend forever that's rolling around the planet, the BFF. If this comes and they start going literally onto people's property with their little suits on and some sort of paper and says, we're taking your birds, that's going to be a huge problem that I think will stop almost immediately. They're going to understand that people are not going to let them take their birds easily like that. Now, speaking of the spraying, I just saw an incredible video coming out of Australia. They seem to be spraying. They say there's an ant problem. So this person's like, yeah, we didn't give you permission. We've sent letters, no low-flying aircraft. But in Australia, apparently they're going all over the place, dropping some chemical to kill all the ants. But at the same time, there's some kind of nicotinoid in it that's also affecting the bees. And it just seems that aerial spraying, at least for what would be the pollinators, is ongoing at the moment. And I know they were destroying a huge amount of hives under some guise of a bee virus, which didn't exist even there in clean colonies. Where they're like, well, it's pretty close over there. It'll eventually get here, so we're going to destroy them now just in advance so it can't move further down this direction. So a lot of farmers in New Zealand were talking about that. And it just seems wherever food is being grown, there is some sort of operation to reduce the productivity or the actual ability to grow that. Now, aerial spraying, at what point could there be that many planes in America? I mean, so you look at some of these areas in Australia, obviously it's going to be, the population's smaller. They know you're limited to a certain range there within the nation. I mean, do you think in the United States they could start spraying every home gardener going over with? People would get sick if they're spraying that much herbicide all around the place, but it seems it was more pesticide spraying across Australia. At what point do people start using, well, they can't in Australia. They don't have anything to protect themselves with. And, that's a running theme also almost everywhere on the planet. They don't have anything to protect themselves with. It's all been taken away. America's the only last country that has that option. And at what point does a low-flying aircraft become a threat to you? And is it low-flying enough where you might be able to get at it? That's the whole thing. Because none of us have like EMP type things, like, in the sci-fi movies where, and I would, can you imagine if we did? It'd be a whole different world. But at that point, I think people would rebel. And I think it would go so far past the Uber of the awareness of at that point, removing an entire food source so you starve, to push you back into a boxed food supplement at some facility or, redemption center somewhere. That would be too much cat out of the bag. And I think that would be the end of those that were trying to push that. Really, I feel I do. They can only go so far, I believe. And when I say them, talking about those that are in control, trying to switch the system and get more control over nations, food supplies, economies. but that, I don't think they would survive that politically. I just don't think too many people would stand up. And like I say, at that point, when it rolls over and says enough's enough, we would definitely reach that with probably under 2 weeks when people would get hungry.
I'm going to switch topics on us. Let's move out to the slow burning death of the dollar. And,
That's your
for the record, I
wheelhouse.
don't think it'll ever go to zero, but it's close enough for all practical purposes for the BRICS to start. And the BRICS was kind of a back burner thing up until, I don't know, a year ago, year and a half or so. And, people knew about it and didn't think much of it. But recent events have really changed the BRICS. So many countries are coming into them. And then with basically the death of the petrodollar officially, where the Saudis didn't re-sign the agreement, it's really changed the financial climate of the world. It's basically bifurcated it, and there's lots to talk about there. So why don't you take us from your perspective? What do you think the BRICS is at now? Where it's going to go? What's it going to do? And does it mean anything to the food supply?
Now, this is not my wheelhouse, David. This is more yours in that whole gold and silverback commodities-based currency reset type of thing. That is definitely your wheelhouse. But being a generalist and understanding, Enbridge is still overseen by the Bank for International Settlements. So if you think that this BRICS utopia is going to break us free of all these oligarchs and central bank control that's been here forever, we're just switching systems. But the same very top players, the Bank for International Settlements, still is in control of Enbridge, and that is the new movement that all of these nations that are in BRICS are moving over to as trade settlements. Now, they have something running parallel right now called BRICS Pay to the SWIFT system, but then ultimately that's all going to switch over to Enbridge, smart contracts, tokenized assets, real world assets. Okay, it's all going that direction. But in terms of food, the BRICS is absolutely starting their own grain exchange with their own commodities prices for grain. Now, this is what I've been focused on pretty much. The economy is one thing. Like I say, that's your wheelhouse. Precious metals, that's definitely your riverboat captaining in the Mississippi on that one. But for me, focused in on the grains, they're absolutely starting different pricing than what you're going to see anywhere on the future, markets across any Western nation. So the BRICS are setting apart, and they're trying to peg it to obviously gold and oil on an equivalent of how many bushels of this, but they're setting their own pricing, and they're already set up and have a beta test program running. There's a sandbox on a grain exchange exclusively for the BRICS, traded within that block of nations outside US dollar pricing and outside of US control or any kind of Western control on that. So their pricing is going to be very different of what you might see for a ton or a bushel of something compared to what we might see here in Chicago on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, Chicago Board of Trade. It's just they're running away with a huge amount of parallel systems that are going to eventually collide with ours based on the prices of these commodities. And then who really takes delivery of the food at that point? Because these operational loans are the things that keep us going and have food in our country. If the operational loans for these farmers cease because of some sort of catastrophic economic event in our country, there will be no food grown in America. And then what happens? Well, we're going to import it from Canada? No, because that contagion is going to slide over the border up there too. Where are we going to import from? We're going to use our old gold reserves to then go buy some sort of gold-backed token from over in the BRICS nations and then use our gold to buy their native gold-backed tokens or asset-backed currency and then buy it from them and import it. I mean, this is a bizarre world we're moving into. So I was asking you, maybe a little more clarity from your end, because that's what I see. But I'm focused on the agriculture so heavily, but you're on the metal side, and how do these two mix in the middle here?
Well, I think Jim Rickards probably did the best, and I didn't only watch it once, but he said, the dollar's not going away. In fact, they need it, and that the BRICS have put a weight of gold as a floor, and that's the best way to do it. You don't want to stamp a number on gold. It's $35 per ounce. The fluctuating price we see in US dollars or yen or euros or whatever. You just say the ruble is this much weight, or a weight of gold is worth X amount, and it floats. So the dollar keeps deteriorating against the ruble, because they're depreciating it faster, or depreciating against gold. So what his point was, if I can get it right, is that you continue to see gold appreciate in terms of US dollars. And then he said, well, what if the US has to buy gold? As you were just saying, perhaps you have to use up gold reserves if there are any. What if they have to buy it? Well, that weakens your own currency at the same time. So basically, we dug ourselves a hole. Russia thought this through. They've got plenty of gold, or a lot more per capita than we do. China's got a lot more than they indicate. And the old adage, he who owns gold makes the rules, true or false? I'd say mostly true, especially if that's your final settlement. And, you know, the thing that he pointed out that I can say a little more succinctly was, this basket of, commodities sounds great. But like he says, there's like 70 different grades of oil. So which one do you pick? And there's, different grades of, wheat. There's winter wheat, there's summer wheat, there's different grades of all this stuff. So when you have a basket of commodities, they're not that uniform, whereas gold is gold. You get to 0.999 fine gold, that's it, baby. It's uniform. It's fungible. Every ounce is like every other ounce, no matter where it was mined. As long as it's refined at 999 fine, same thing for silver. So that, again, kind of gives the, brief history of why those two elements, work out so well as money. Because, if you're getting Venezuela heavy tar oil, it's really not as valuable as light sweet, which we export from the U.S. Going a little further, you lived in China. I was only there for 10 days. When I was there, every time I go to a foreign country, I would say every time, but on my initial visit, I usually try to buy some silver somewhere just to see, how easy it is, if the locals are familiar with it, what they think about it, can you get it at a bank, all that stuff. And I haven't done it every time, but I've done it several times. In China, there was no retail silver in Beijing that I could find. And the only thing I could find after a pretty good search was silver chopsticks. That was it. That would be about the only, investment in silver I could make outside of jewelry. The Shanghai Gold Exchange and the Shanghai Futures Exchange has got this premium on gold and silver now, and it's been there for some time. And of course, that's an arbitrage, and you're familiar with arbitrage being in the coffee market and all of your knowledge. So my thinking is this is primarily big buyers for industry on the silver side, meaning primarily buying it for solar panels, other stuff, but just solar. Do you think, or do you know, if there's been more and more investment? I mean, what I read on the web and people that I trust, but they aren't there on the ground. I've got probably more Chinese connections than they do. The limited amount of Chinese resources I have, yes, it's starting to become, I won't say fashionable, but an investment that the Chinese haven't pursued since basically the Opium Wars. Do you have any insight into that?
I was in Taiwan during this year's Lunar New Year. And not only in Taiwan, but in China, they were pushing people to buy these 1-gram gold pieces, like gold beans for a better term. Well, that had run its course where after Lunar New Year, China Central Bank over there was saying that, okay, we have enough gold. We, as a central bank, need to start buying it again. Citizens stop buying gold, move over and start buying silver now. And I don't know exactly what they're offering as their silver product, but the message out on the street was move over to start buying silver now. And this is for the average, just general Chinese citizen, stop buying gold. So obviously when the government tells them throughout all their media on the CCTV station, stop buying gold, everybody's going to stop. They're not even going to go in and not even inquire about it, because you even asking after the powers that be told you to stop doing that, even if you were to ask the question, would still put you and deduct maybe some points off your social credit score.
Ouch.
So and instantly that would just run against a brick wall, and gold sales would stop literally the same day on the same hour, and there would be zero sales. It's all for the government now. China Central Bank's picking that up. But the way it's moving over into silver, and I'll tell you my story, 2008, Chengdu went into a jewelry shop and they were selling 10-ounce bars, but they were just like poured, cast bars. They weren't, stamped out of a mint anywhere. They did have the marks on them, obviously, with, where it came from and what the fineness. I think it was 4 nines. That was a long time ago. but they were selling it in 10-ounce bars poured. There was nothing like we see, you know, with the really beautiful 10-ounce bars from like the Royal Canadian Mint or anything. It was a poured bar. That's it. And that's the only thing I ever saw either there in terms of silver. And I ended up buying it. They wouldn't let me take it out of the country. That was the whole thing too. I couldn't exit out. And they told me that when I bought it, you know, you can't take this out with you as a foreigner. If they find it in your luggage, they're going to confiscate it. So I had to sell it back before it left. About the same price. I didn't make any money on it, but it was just the same thing. I thought when I bought it, I would be able to take it with me, but it just didn't work out to be. But your silver chopstick sounds like a better idea because you can nibble off a little bit if I need a 10th ounce or something. But generally, the shift is silver now across China, just in a general fashion. I can get more information as well. I'll try to dig into that a bit.
Well, we do stay in touch. It kind of goes in ebbs and flows, but yeah, if you could, and I'll check with my Chinese sources again. But you know, once a trend starts, it doesn't stop until it stops, and that may sound corny. It was the late great Jim Dines that stated, "A trend in motion continues till it actually stops." So if this trend is in motion and it becomes a movement, and I don't like real estate, it's burned me. I don't like whatever, and silver becomes kind of the investment de jour for the Chinese. When you got 1.4 billion Chinese, that's a lot of potential buyers, and it's a lot more affordable than gold.
Yeah, so let me ask you then, with the arbitrage over there, with did a video just yesterday. It was $4 over. It was actually $4.01 over what was here priced in the U.S. or over in the U.K. So what kind of really volume pull will that create? I mean, is it such a thing, $4 over an ounce? I mean, they need to physically get it there. It's not like they're paper trading it. It's a physical delivery on that arbitrage. And how, you know, and then maybe the second question, I was reading somewhere 18 years to get mining up from that sort of, you know, discovery phase into the testing and validation phase, and then actually getting mining equipment out there. And then before you even get anything out of the ground, average 18 years. I don't know if that's true, but then where does that put us if we're moving into this huge demand for silver, even bigger demand for gold, and these mines are coming online? I mean, what's that, you know, blow, or there's going to be some sort of step back in there is going to be, you're going to front running it. You're going to wait how long before it really comes out where it can kind of maybe smooth out some of that demand?
18 doesn't sound unreasonable. It depends on the jurisdiction, how mining friendly and all that. But by the time you make a discovery, do a preliminary economic assessment, go through all the bureaucracies as far as environmental protection and the ESG mandates, it takes a long time. I mean, you're looking probably, I mean, if you put it on hyperdrive and you're politically connected, it still probably take you 10. So back to the, you know, how much is imported. I know more on the India side, and they smuggle gold in, but gold is a much more easily smuggled item because it's 80 times the value of silver. So you don't have to have a large amount to make that arbitrage worth smuggling in. Now, what I'm trying to determine, and I've yet to determine to my satisfaction, so I won't say it publicly, normally when you have these big discrepancies on an arbitrage like that, the government steps in and says, yeah, but there's a import duty on it, and it's $4 or something along those lines, so that there really is no real true arbitrage, because they're going to mitigate that problem by, you know, pocketing the difference. Is that true or false in China? I don't know. I haven't been able to determine it yet. I'm working on it. But I did talk to one of my Chinese friends that talked about they'll smuggle it in. I said, well, like silver, you know, takes more volume than gold. He goes, yeah, you like make a mast on a sailboat out of silver. Can you imagine what that would weigh? He was just giving me an example. But there are ways to do it. Where there's a will, there's a way, the old adage. How much is coming in or out, I don't know. I haven't listened to others too much on is it really taking place or not. You could do it synthetically in the futures markets, but all you do there is gain, you know, paper. You're not gaining silver. So will it go from India into China with that kind of arbitrage? Yeah, I would think so. So that's probably one of the most likely scenarios to take place, but that's a big spread, and it's big enough, I think, for people to do it. It isn't as easy as it sounds. Still to be determined. I don't want to talk too much because David said this. David says, I don't know. What I do know is it has been smuggled in the past. I know it happens in India. It's likely to happen in China. How much is the big question. Because if it's significant, well, you blow out the COMEX in a couple months. I mean, if you're going to make that kind of ARB, the transportation costs aren't going to eat up $1 out of those $4. You're still getting a 3%, excuse me, a $3 move on a $30 item. You make it 10% net. That's better than the T-bills. So I don't know. I wish I did. I'm still working on it. I hopefully will get, verifiable answers. But if you can help me with some of your contacts, certainly would appreciate it, because I would really like to know the truth. I mean, there's some, let's say, less qualified, well, people that don't investigate, they just write what they think as if it's fact when it's just what they're thinking.
Yeah, I'm wondering how many 1,000-ounce bars have made its way from the COMEX on an airplane over there, and I actually got physically delivered into that, and people were able to really take in hand that difference on it. Is that a common thing? All right, you and I, we both want to take delivery on our contracts. Thanks, COMEX. You take 1,000-ounce bars. We got 1,000,000 ounces of silver, and we go over there, and then we make $3 million in a day just after writing, taking delivery after what, a 3-month or 1-month contract. Really, it couldn't be that simple. It just can't be.
Yeah, it's not.
Yeah. So I remember. Do you remember that old show Magnum PI?
I do.
There was one episode I remember. You made me, because one of the boats sunk in their little harbor, or their little, swimming estuary in there outside in the mansion. And each time they went back, there was a different piece of the railing that was gone, but the railing was made out of gold that they'd sprayed with the paint. And the railing on this sailboat was all 100% gold. And after it sank, they went back and kept taking off the railing, and that's what disappeared. And that's how they really did smuggle it in, was as the railing on the boat. So nothing new under the sun, is there?
Well, people are pretty ingenious. I'm going to circle back a little bit on, if you're ever in a situation where you want to get gold or silver outside of the country and it's going to be confiscated at the airport, you buy art object. In Germany, probably not the last time, you could take silver out of Germany, by the way, or I did. But, the power of the pyramid, the seeing eye, so they had this on sale or for sale. It was quite expensive. It was a lot more than the silver content, but I got that through customs, no problemo, because it's just a piece of art. What's it worth? I go, it's an art object. I don't know. It's worth a lot. Filled out their little paperwork and all that. So just point of fact, you need to get something in or out, make it jewelry. Jewelry's usually works, or an art object, or some combination thereof.
Do you think it'll really come that bad if there's some sort of, maybe not hyperinflationary going on to Venezuela or Zimbabwe type here in the US, but if we get into some extreme inflation where they really do need to confiscate metals, do you envision that it might cascade that far down where they would prevent you from leaving the country with metals, or leaving the country with any types of, a value that, no, it has to stay in America. We need to reboot the system. I mean, they did it back, in the 30s. Is it possible it could happen again, or is that just really way outside of the radar possibility there?
It's way outside, but being an engineer, you got to look at all possibilities, which means 0 to infinity. And you got to remember, in Germany, the stories which are true about, overcoat having these big buttons of platinum that were covered in cloth, and it's just a button on your coat and walking through. There you go. So yeah, it has happened in the past. Could it happen again? Highly unlikely. Highly unlikely. But probability of 0? No, there's a probability to it. Very low one.
And that just makes you try to fast track some of these skills of who knows how to take and shape whatever metal it is, and then cover it with cloth, and have the ability to put some sort of hook on the back and then sew that onto a jacket, or take a round or something and then get your torch and bring it into an ingot mold, and then be able to take that out and bend it around and make it into something you can put on your arm. Maybe have something you could stamp on it to make it look official. what kind of old world skills would we need to then try to facilitate this? Because I don't think a lot of people are at that level or even thinking of that possibility to have those skills or materials ready to jump into that arena.
Well, be
Growing
a
food's
small
a stretch
percentage.
at best anyway for most
Yeah.
people. They don't even know how to garden. So getting into the metals, that's
Well, that's an extreme example, but it has happened in the past, as I say. And, there'll be somebody, a welder or whatever, be able to, melt it. And then all I have to do is make a mold, a sand mold. And you could make a cat and out of silver, and you paint it, and it's white and it's blue and it looks funky and it's a psychedelic cat. And the only thing that tip them off is what it weighs. But even that, so I mean, there's ways to do it, as I said earlier, where there's a will, there's a way. Will that take place? And I think it'd only be in certain jurisdictions. I think, and as you said about the food situation, I think it's similar to the metals. It's like, there's some pow-pows out there and people have said, you've gone too far. You're not taking this. It's my life savings. It's mine. It's not yours. And look it up. We still have a right to this property, or whatever. But again, it's such a bizarro world. I mean, going back to the 2020 magic potion and all that stuff, if you would have asked me, I pretty much saw most of this coming, not perfectly, but the overall big picture. But I never threw in an illness. I never threw in the mass hysteria. I never threw in that all governments would require basically the same thing, which to me is a further proof that, there isn't any independence on the global stage. They're all in it together, more or less. And that's frightening because whether you're, democratic, constitutional republic, communist, fascist, socialist, doesn't really matter because the bankers are at the top controlling the whole thing. You can have whatever flavor you want or whatever one we tell you have in this jurisdiction. That's secondary to how the flows of money change. And that's why I was so glad you pointed out about the IMF and how the banking system really works. Because on the digital side, it's the same thing. I forget the number. It's something like ISO 20022 or 222. Anyway, what it says is all digital currency come under one umbrella. Big Brother holds it all. So you just think, as George Carlin, one of my favorites, is you just think you have the illusion of choice. You don't. That's the truth of it.
the ISO crypto compliance there that's going to be running on, from Hashgraph eventually. So with the world moving, this is one of the most important points that's been brought up in the conversation. What David just said is that all governments are moving in tandem as a school of fish. And it didn't matter. We saw it just completely outright those last 4 years that even North Korea had agreed with the rest of the world and decided to move in tandem. So if you think that this switch at the end of the age here and just the random happenstance of this year and last year, everybody decided to create the BRICS and move to Enbridge and digitize and tokenize real world assets and put everything on smart contracts and wrap it so we can move digitally monies around the world. And then just this section of the planet decided to do it. Everybody's in on it. Because if you realize, maybe it's from a naive point here for me to look at it, we've run kind of to the end of the debt system here in what we consider the collective West. I mean, everybody's got the house, they got the cars, they got the TVs, there's really nowhere else debt can be issued. I mean, businesses are now closing. They're not going to be getting new loans. Nobody's getting real estate loans. We really are at the very end of the debt system. I just can't continue to grow. I mean, it's like me with my orchard. When I see a branch that's dying or dead, I just prune it off. And it seems that our world is being collectively pruned, and we're all the countries in unison, as same they did the last 4 years, are all collectively setting up the new system because they know they'll be involved in it, and it's just nothing more than a stage play. The curtain's closing this way, and it appears to be opening over there with a new scene and a new stage, but it's really, it'd be the same directors, would it not? It'd be the same film crew, the same lighting crew. It's just the curtain changed and the backdrop and the setting changed. But if you think it's just some random organic thing because they're tired of the United States bullying everybody, that's a great excuse. But I don't know if you would agree or disagree with that.
No, I'm 100% with you on that. Well, I think we've gone far enough. It's okay with you. Certainly, you can have the last word. We want to know, where to find you on the web. And I know you still have a YouTube presence. I used to watch every one. I'll admit I don't have time to do them all, but you certainly have some very intriguing interviews that are thought-provoking as always, and really enjoyed our conversation. I'll have you back, especially if I learn more about the Chinese situation and what it portends for the metals markets. This is really key. I mean, if what we've been reading on the web is really true and the arbitrage is available, as you said, it wouldn't take very long to right a wrong, so to speak. And the other thing is just thinking about front running. I mean, there's been a fund in Europe that bought a great deal of physical silver, and they've had some pretty good in and outs. It's almost as if they knew what was going to happen, which we did generally speaking, and imported a bunch of 1,000-ounce bars, and now they're selling them at a higher price for delivery somewhere else. Is that China? Who knows?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if it truly is the Chinese government now telling their citizens to buy silver. Without a billion people, or let's say even only 500 million have the means to, with a little bit of extra money, to be able to purchase silver. I mean, how quickly would that drain out the world's reserves? Because then the CCP can come up and say, no, it's not for us. Not for us. It's for our citizens. You must deliver. It's not for us as the government. Our citizens demand it, and we demand for our citizens that you deliver. So I'm curious, really, like how much extra silver's out there if the Chinese start buying even 1 ounce, 10 ounce, 100-ounce bars, or they get 50 ounces or 20 ounces each. Like how long before the entire world supply is over in China at just the individual level buying? Maybe that's my last question.
I got an answer for you, because I did a video years ago. It was my friend Ted's favorite video. It's called Myths in the Silver Market. And, the old adage, or it's really not an adage, but if you go back to, my history, when, almost everybody in my generation learned that you should have some silver and gold. And what was stated by almost every coin dealer in America was everyone should own a little. So every coin dealer out there would tell you, don't overdo it. Everyone should own a little. Well, who's everyone and how much is a little? That's the start of the video. And I said, well, let's just take the United States as everyone. It's not, it's just the United States, 325 million. And let's say, what's a little? I'd say a little is like 2 ounces. 2 ounces of silver is not going to change your lifestyle. It's not going to protect your wealth. It's 2 ounces. It's a little. Well, 2 ounces times 320 was like 750 million ounces, which is basically the annual mining supply at the time I made the video. So it would take 4% of the world's population to buy 2 ounces each to corner the silver market on an annual basis. So multiply that by the Chinese buying 3 ounces each, game over. And that's why when I get, more uppity than I am now, and people tell, silver isn't money and blah, 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 and some of my hot buttons. It's like in 1900, if you didn't have silver, you didn't have money. You couldn't buy anything without silver in the 1900s. It's basically the world was more or less at a silver/gold standard. And now, no one even thinks of it as money for the most part. So it is vital, it's imperative, and you're not turning off the solar thing. And I think the powers that be didn't realize that it's a finite resource. And, a few people that have some vision economically can see what it looks like going forward. So what are you going to do? Quit making solar panels? I doubt it. Solar still the amount of silver per panel isn't that great to where it has a huge effect on the overall price. So it's price inelastic for a long time. It could double, it could triple, and you're still going to make solar panels because the cost of the panel is much greater than the input of silver for that panel. So, and then if you add, we keep talking about the Chinese saying, don't buy gold, buy silver, I'm going to have to put a smile on my face because this squeeze could happen, or get, more or less organic. But all that's conjecture. We'll have to wait and see.
Exciting days. I'm glad we're alive to experience it. It's like some people look at, I just keep looking at, wow, this is such a fascinating time to be alive, really witnessing history as it unfolds. And if you can find the opportunities as well, it's a life worth living.
Right.
I appreciate you having me on today. Thank you.
Give us your website and all the ways to contact you. Do you do consultations by chance? No.
I don't. I was thinking about it. I'm rebranding completely everything off the Adapt 2030 into our new rebrand, which shall be announced, I think, Tuesday of next week. We were trying to go live with the website, but you know how it is with websites. Sometimes there's technical glitches and whatnot. But if you want to go to oilseedcrops.org right now, that is my go-to point where you can contact me. I'm always happy to talk with people. I don't, like you say, do the consultation where click in and then, you know, set up a time on a calendar and things, and I'll bill you for that. If you have something interesting to share, I would be happy to talk with you.
Sure.
That's the whole thing. Like in my world, currency is information flow. You know, it's one thing to talk about dollars for a certain amount of hours, but the information is, at least I personally right now, valuable for me to try to see where the trend is moving to, not only to give the information for other people to help them prepare for the changes, for me to front run it and protect myself and my family and my life.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, there is a little greediness there. I want to protect myself too. And I want to be out in front of all these changes. So when they come, I'm already in the next 2 steps ahead of whatever's already happening right now. And David, you're very much the same way. You're out there, and you know, I'm not going to say much about where you are, but you know, you've already seen the future, and you've already prepared yourself several steps ahead of the rest of the world doing it too. It's just information gets us there, and it's great to share that to protect others. So thank you for your time.
Oh, thank you. And, you know, going back to the beginning, I mean, we're ahead on the food thing by at least a year, if not 2. And not to brag, you know, but I mean, you know, I got the ha ha he he troller community, you know, but they're not ha haing and he heing anymore. So,
hey, trolls, you can come work on my farm. You get free room and board, and that's all you get. And, yeah, you know, like you're working on my land because I front ran that thing there because you know, food. If you, and just on a serious note, if you're not growing food and you can't protect your family at that basic level of having enough food for them to survive, you're not doing your job as a parent. You need to be able to grow food for your family and for your children and for your wife or husband, whoever that's working there, whoever's going to be in charge of the gardens. You need that for your family. If you don't have that, you are not protecting your families in any way, shape, or form. You're becoming a burden on society at that point. And you're going to have to do anything they require for you to go get that food. And I mean anything. So when it happens, don't come crying and, well, they're treating us so badly. No, you just didn't see all the signs. Your basic number one thing, you got to grow food and you need to protect your wealth. So bye for now.
okay. Bye-bye.